Hi, I'm John McCormick, the pastor of CrossWork Christian Center in Round Rock, Texas, and I want to show you where CrossWork started. This is where CrossWork began, here at the Wingate Conference Center in Round Rock, Texas, at the Wingate Hotel on December 6, 2009. Our first service started at 10 o'clock a.m. So driving up here today was really kind of special because it brought back a number of memories. This is where it all started. So I'm going to take you exactly where we had our very first service in the first ballroom here. So follow me here. You can see that that's one of the original signs that we had, CrossWork Christian Center. Our first service was in the first quarter of this ballroom, and we're standing in it right now. That day, we really didn't know how many people were going to come to service, so we set up for approximately 100. This was the front part of our sanctuary, if you will, and the table, we had a table here with a projector on it, and the podium was here. We didn't have a band, and we did not have a musician. We had a very anointed praise and worship leader who led us in worship off of tracks. And so that's how we started that day. In fact, very interesting, that was the first Sunday, and we observed communion on the first Sundays. Well, we didn't have any stewardesses, so we called around, and some of our neighbor churches were kind enough to allow some of their stewardesses to come and assist us with communion. And so that's how we did communion that day. It was a very special day. We had about 75 people or so come to the first service, and at the end, 32 people joined. And that's how CrossWork got started.
Let's talk about CrossWork, where the name came from and the original idea to start the church.
That's a very interesting question, and it has some very good stories attached to both. Prior to CrossWork, I pastored in Georgetown.
Okay.
And I recognized at the end of about the 5th year that I had done all that I could do there.
Okay.
And I also realized that God created me to sort of pastor a church that was a little different from what our traditional churches were. We're AME, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. But God called me to kind of pastor and do a church a little different. So I approached the bishop at the time, Bishop Gregory Ingram, and asked him for permission to plant a church in Round Rock to help to sort of advance our exposure into this area north of Boston. He subsequently agreed to do it, and then came the task of trying to name the church. I'll never forget this. So I was in my study at my home, and I was trying to come up with a name that was sort of non-traditional.
Okay.
So I came up with all sorts of names. I came up with New Beginnings, but there was a church that was already named New Beginnings. So I kept thinking. So I came downstairs and I was talking to my wife, and I said to her, I said, I'm trying to think of a name for this new church. And so she said, well, what about CrossWork? And I said, no, I need to come up with a name. I mean, I didn't even give it a second. It wasn't like I stopped and said, that sounds, I just dismissed it immediately. And I said, no, I need to come up with a catchy name. And so I kept trying to do that. And about a week to 2 weeks later, I was sitting on an airplane, getting ready to leave Austin. I think I was going to Houston. And as I was sitting on the plane, the Lord said, call it CrossWork. And the reason that I know it was the Lord is because when my wife suggested it initially, I didn't give it any other thought. I dismissed it immediately, and in fact, never thought about it again.
Really?
But sitting on that plane, that was when God said, call it CrossWork. And I said, okay.
What does CrossWork mean?
CrossWork is, in my estimation, what church really is about, the Christian church. Our fundamental belief, it revolves around Jesus Christ and his death, burial, and resurrection. And so when you look at the cross, which for Christians is a unifying symbol, and you think about what task the church has, CrossWork is born out of Jesus's great commission to his disciples before he ascended. And so what we thought was, or at least what I thought was, and I never asked my wife, by the way, how she came up with it. And to this day, I haven't asked her.
Okay.
But as I'm thinking of it, as I was thinking of it then, because the church a church should be working
Yes.
to make disciples of others. It should not just sit to be admired on the street, but it ought to be working. And so that's literally what this church means. It's the work of the cross. It's the work of Jesus Christ, which is to go out and do ministry.
There's many churches all over the city, and even in the Round Rock area. Can you tell me what prompted you to plant the CrossWork seed?
As I indicated, we are an African Methodist Episcopal church with a different flavor.
Yes.
And it seemed that this particular area north of Austin, we wanted to try to expand the brand, if you would. And so that's where I believe the Lord led me to do it. And I received sort of confirmation, because when you plant a church, especially the way we did it, which is from scratch, I mean, literally, the only thing CrossWork was born off of a sheet of paper. And there were no members who another church sponsored us, none of that. So, of course, it's a little scary, and you kind of want to know, am I doing the right thing? Is this really what God wants me to do? And shortly after we were planted, we launched. I remember receiving a call from someone who wanted to sow a seed into the ministry, and was wanting our address. And so I made sure that particular person, who's not a member of the church and still not to this
Really?
day, no, but called and said, we really want to be a part of what you're doing, and we want to sow into the ministry. So that particular person sent a gift to us. And I remember when the gift came, because a number of people were sending gifts to help us get started. But this particular one was a large gift.
Really?
And it took my breath away, because what it was confirmation that I was doing exactly what God told me to do.
Over the 10 years that CrossWork has been in place, there has been some pillars. Can we talk about those pillars and what they did to help you stay motivated?
Sure. Two people come to mind immediately. The first one would be Sister Ruby Edwards, who was a phenomenal person. From the very beginning, was extremely supportive of me and protective of me. But she also was able to speak to me very directly and tell me things that I needed to hear. She prayed for me, and I can hear her voice right now. She was a phenomenal person. And when the Lord called her home, I wondered how we were going to be able to continue the trajectory that CrossWork was on by losing a pillar like that. But God being God, stepped right in, and so we've had people step up, and one in particular who's been very, very instrumental to me. The other one was as instrumental that the Lord called home, and that was Sister Dorothy
Yeah.
Carter, who was the chair of our hospitality ministry. And one of the things about Sister Dorothy, she had an outstanding personality. And whenever we would have a function, she would always tell me, and I remember this, she would always say that, Pastor, the church doesn't need to spend money on food. I have my crew. She used to say, I have my crew, and I've called around, and we have everything covered. And she would coordinate with the other members of the church. And so when the Lord calls her home, that was another pillar.
Yeah.
But again, the Lord has provided. When the Lord calls one home, the Lord will always provide someone to step in and carry on the work that needs to be done. Because one day, someone's going to have to step in for me.
Yes.
CrossWork should survive me. If it doesn't survive me, there's a problem. It should go and live. She should live far longer than I live or pastor this church.